Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Hello, and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and this is the podcast where we talk about leadership, presentation skills, communication challenges, and so much more. Before I get into today's interview, I'd like to invite you to see how your presentation skills are doing by taking our free 4-minute assessment at speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can see where your presentation skills are strong and where perhaps a little bit of support could get you the results you need and the recognition that you deserve. And if you score highly enough, you'll get a free conversation about this assessment so that you can learn how to apply what you learned. My guest today is Jen Du Plessis. And Jen is a very interesting leader in terms of leadership, having built multiple teams. And I was very excited to bring her in because she's great at talking about creating world-class teams. And I always looking for advice and tips for that. The official bio is Lady Jen Du Plessis is known as the leading expert in creating world-class teams. Jen works with high-achieving leaders and entrepreneurs who are earning six figures. And for those who are looking to up their game to reach seven figures a year, whether it's within an organization or as an entrepreneur. She's been in the financial services industry for 4 decades and was listed in the top 200 nationally ranked mortgage organizations and funded over $1 billion in mortgage loans. She's the author of numerous Amazon #1 best-selling books, host of 2 top-ranking podcasts. That's a lot of work. I'm amazed. And she was the producer and the host of her own TV show, Tell Me I Can't, which was streaming on Zondra TV, JD3TV.com, and the C-Suite Network. Jen is a very charismatic speaker, and she's shared the stages with such icons as Tony Robbins, Les Brown, Darren Hardy, Jeff Hoffman, Sharon Lechter, and many more. Most importantly, Jen believes that you can live your legacy while building it, and it's time to break free from the daily grind with strong leadership skills and powerful teams. She mentors people to stop working in and on their business or their career and start working above and beyond. I love that phrase. I was really excited to interview her. It was very useful. So I know you'll enjoy it. On to the interview with Jen Du Plessis. Jen Du Plessis, thank you so much for joining us on Speakers Who Get Results.
I'm happy to be here. I can't wait to explore whatever it is you're going to be asking me.
Oh, good. Well, I had a great time talking on your podcast, and so I'm delighted to be able to share you with my listeners. So before I get into the many questions I have for you, tell us quickly who would be your dream interview. If you could interview someone who's no longer with us, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be listening?
Yeah, that would be Mother Teresa.
Mother
Teresa would be. And let's see what I would ask her. I think the most important thing that I'm interested about her is, that pinnacle moment when, she took her faith to a deeper level. For me, that's always been a challenge. Am I deep enough? Do I need to go deeper? What are the words I should use? Should I let go and let God? And I think that's one thing that I admire so much about her is as a visionary, she did that. She just let go and let God. And we all try to be, when you look at the word Christian, it actually means, Ian means to be like Christ. And so we're trying And when people say, "Are you a Christian?" I go, "I'm trying." I'm trying, right? Because she just has that unique ability. And so I'd love to know how she did it. I'd love to know what that moment was.
Wow, that sounds like yeah, wonderful and just so awesome. I used to live near just up the hill from her convent in San Francisco. And so
Oh, wow.
we saw them, that was our neighbors. We saw the sisters walking around. And so it was always something very interesting.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Jen, one of the reasons I wanted to ask you to the show is that a lot of my work deals with women who are being taken for granted, not just women, but people who are being taken for granted within their organization or not being heard, just not being listened to. And you had a major experience with that. I'd be curious to hear your story. What happened to you and how did you solve it? And when did you decide to take a stand?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story because, I was in the mortgage space for 40 years and I started in 1983. I was in it a little bit earlier, but that's a whole other story. But I was in it in 1983. And at that time, women were all operational. Nobody was in sales. Nobody was management. Even managing operations was a difficult thing. But over the years, I grew through, climbed the corporate ladder, et cetera. And I was a branch manager for a mortgage company. And I just had a unique ability to lead people and to read people. And I'm an empath. I had a lot of training in disc profiling and situational leadership and utilizing the management cycle. And so what ended up happening was I got to the point where I just was being moved around from branch to branch. On a Friday, they'd call me into an office and say, "Hey, we're going to move you to another office on Monday because it's falling apart. The culture's a mess. Everybody, doesn't like each other. The sales are down. And we're going to swap you and another manager because we want you to go over there and fix it." And so I ultimately, and that happened 4 or 5 times in my career at this company for, over a period of time. And what ended up happening is I became a pioneer and not a settler. And so I never got to realize the results of my work. Just as I was getting there and excited about the future, they would yank me out of that branch and move me to another branch. And so what ended up happening was all these men would go to President's Club and Chairman's Club, even though I'm the one who built their branches for them.
So the men who were brought in after you fixed the situation.
Yeah. Yeah. They were brought in afterwards. And there was never a case where there was a woman who was brought in, and there was never another woman who was a pioneer. I didn't see any that were like that. And, and I had just had enough. And I wanted to, it wasn't about the President's Club or anything, but I just wanted to have some, consistency. I wanted to be able to challenge my abilities to ensure that I could be a settler and that I was not going to be just the person who chases the shiny objects, goes to the next best thing, because I could see that was a habit that was starting to happen to me. And I was seeing it in other areas of my life as well.
And before we go on to what you did, can you define the difference between pioneer and settler, especially for our international listeners? Pioneer, that's a very American phrase. So
Right. So pioneers are people that, are innovators, creative. They're they go out to new territories, back in the
explorers,
1800s. That was, explorers, and they start a town and they get everything all set up. And then the settlers come in once they hear about this town that's been created. The settlers come in and they're the ones who make all the money, because they're the ones who open the casino and open the barber shop and have the general store, and they raise their children there, and they have this beautiful consistency and continuity in their life. Whereas the pioneer then says, "See ya, I'm going to go find the next best thing." And it's tiring and it's lonely and it's dangerous sometimes. There's a lot of risk associated with it. So
for our international listeners, this is then a metaphor out of the American West. So if you watched any Western movies, that's where this comes from. So you wanted to be a settler. They kept wanting you to be a pioneer and you got tired of it. You wanted to settle down and enjoy the results. What made you decide that, wait, this is not what I want? Or I imagine you felt uncomfortable for a while before you actually did something about it.
Yeah, well, as I said, I was starting to see this pattern develop in my personal life, right? I was starting to see that I wanted friends, but I really didn't want them because, we wouldn't go deep. I wouldn't take my armor off because maybe they won't be there. Maybe I don't want them that long. And so everything was superficial.
Mhm.
And I was just seeing that, if I took on a new sport or a new hobby, that it was just short-lived because that had become a habit for me now. And I realized that I didn't want that. And, and I was never concerned it was going to be my marriage, which is now 40 years, but it wasn't, I wasn't concerned that was going to be my marriage. But I started saying, it just wasn't fair to me not to have real strong relationships, really see the development of my staff and my employee, my team, grow. And I wanted to realize that. And I wanted to challenge myself to ensure that I had the capability to do that. And so there was a time where it came up and I said, no, I said, you've done this to me X amount of times. Let me show you the results that I've created in each of those branches. They haven't created those. I created them. And those employees are now staying there because I created a culture that this manager then came into and adapted to. Now, some came in and messed it all up again,
Yes,
but I never
yes.
had to go back to the same place, which was good. But, I just put my foot down and I led with facts to get me to where I wanted to go so that I could have that sustainability in one specific area. And what was great is that when that happened, they saw how great I was. And now I went straight up the ladder instead of hopping from a different ladder, climbing a ladder of success.
Lateral
I
move,
wasn't,
yes.
yeah, it was constantly like this. And I now was shooting straight up to the top and ended up becoming a national sales manager.
So basically what you did was you framed it in a language they could understand and called attention. And called attention to what you were good at. Good for you.
Yeah.
So this actually leads me to then what I was going to ask you, what I wanted you on the show is because you are known for creating great teams. How do you create a world-class team? And so how did you do
that's
this?
a big loaded question.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big loaded question. I think that, where it stems from and why it's so needed in today's world is, I don't feel that people are managed anymore. I think it's more leadership, and there's something called the management cycle that I no longer call it that. I now call it the leadership cycle because it's the same thing. But no one wants to be managed. Everyone wants to be led. We want to be inspired. We don't want to be micromanaged, et cetera. So what I find is that because entrepreneurship is so large and because of the pandemic, there are so many people that are doing hybrid working and, that many people who have decided to start their own business or that are in management positions, whether before or after the pandemic, lack, I'm going to call it management / leadership skills. They lack the real technical piece of this. It's just by attrition, they become managers and they want everyone to be like them. And they treat everybody the same, which is not what you do when you're a leader. You have to meet people where they are. And so I think that, having management experience and training, I trained all the managers at this company. I became a national manager trainee and I still do that today. I do that for corporations, companies, small businesses, teams. I come in and I teach them how to manage. I teach them how to lead. And it's a long drawn out thing, right? It doesn't happen overnight, but I think that it stems from the lack of having that training, which means that most people aren't as good leaders as they are. And so they hire on emotion. They hire at the last second when they're about ready to run out of all the other options. And then they point fingers at everyone else that they're horrible instead of, I wasn't prepared. I didn't train you. I didn't have a correct onboarding. And that costs money to turn
Oh,
people like
gosh,
that.
yes.
And opportunity costs that are left on the table when someone leaves, and you have to dive into all those pieces. And so it's about, leveling up and really understanding what the growth is of your team members. There's so many aspects, but we can dive into a couple things with it. But that's really where it stems, is not having any education around being a manager or a leader.
So say you're in an organization, I've certainly, one of the things about opera is a business, and 30 years being part of that. Sometimes some companies were really well managed, and sometimes they weren't. Sometimes it was a leader who was charismatic and got people to come, got people to donate. So like they were bringing in the money, but the staff was a mess. A couple of quick preliminary questions one is, if you feel like maybe you're not as good a manager as you should be, but how do we give ourselves permission to ask for help? Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I think that, there's a couple ways that we could go with this question, is that, as a leader, when we come in, so the example you're using is the opera house, right? Or the whole opera. You have production people, you have stars, you have painters, you have musicians, right? The ticket sellers, there's all kinds of people. And I think we have to understand what the roles are in our various, for our team members, as well as our role.
Mm-hmm.
Our role is the visionary. Our role is to let everyone else know what we want to accomplish, rather than having them focus on their one little job and not understanding how it fits into the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that leaders don't do. They come in and they just want to tell everybody what to do, and again, this is a lack of leadership skills. They just come in and say, well, I'm the manager and it's going to be done my way. And so I think that's part of the bigger issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
But understanding everyone's roles is number one, including your own. Then number two is, where do they overlap and how do they facilitate and serve one another? So for example, if you have your own company, everything is A to Z by you. You do everything, A to Z. When you start hiring a team, you might do A and B, but someone else has to do C, but they need to understand what happens at B and what happens at D, so that they do the best possible job, right? And so you have instead of going horizontal, it becomes a vertical business, and that's something that people need to really understand in order to start hiring good team members. The other thing is that we tend to hire for the need that I shouldn't say hurts us right now, but the need that's right in our face, and it's a knee-jerk reaction. As opposed to, where is my time being spent, drained, whatever, where it's taking away from my genius zone, and realizing that I need to hire for a role and not hire because I think they're nice, and we'll worry about, oh, I just think you'd be great. I think you're nice. You're great. You seem great with people. Let's just bring you on and we'll find a place for you. Worst thing you could ever do. Worst thing you could ever do. And so we're not clear on the roles that we want in our building our dream team, and then always being a talent scout for those roles, whether it's today or 5 years from now, but always having our fingers out there and creating relationships, so that when the time comes, we don't start from scratch. We just reach into our second and third string, right? Or our pool of talent that we have created relationships with over a long period.
Well, there's a huge opportunity cost when somebody leaves, then plus you have to have people scramble to get the work done. And takes 2 or 3 months at least to recruit somebody new and then train them. So if you can hire the right people in the first place, is a good thing.
Well, and cross-pollinating, cross-training, so that when that, there's a void in that position, others can come from, the person who does E and F, whatever, they can come in and fill that void temporarily, so that there's no gap in your business. And what tends to happen is everyone works in these silos, and then you've got this big hole. And so we want these people to be cross-trained to be able to go in. Not you. It's not your job to say, well, I'm going to go in and do it, but to have these people cross-trained for that. But you don't have to wait 3 months. You know, if you're doing a great job at managing and leading, the signs will be there. And there's some analysis that you can do on a monthly basis. There's some meetings you can have with people, some questioning you can do so that you're not surprised. But even if it happened, because you've got this pool of talent that you've been recruiting over a long period of time that says, you know, hey, I just want to be your friend, that they rise up and you're able to call 4 or 5 people all at once and get someone on right away.
So talk a little bit about this, cultivating this pool of talent.
Yeah. You know,
it sounds a little cold to say making friends with people because you might need them later. Talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you know, I have a client right now, you know, she said, I have to start over again because they quit. And I said, no, you should, you know, for working to create, to be a talent scout. And that's our job as a leader or owner of a company, is our job is to always have people around that we could pull from and have, you know, create relationships with. So for example, and I know these are crazy things, we tend to look for someone who's looking for a job. And that's fine. But what if we were to pull from someone who already works in a field similar to ours or has, you know, skills that we're seeking, because now we're clear on the role. So we're always, you know, very aware of the skills that they have. And we're having conversations. So let me give you an example. I was, you know, working on something and I was talking to an insurance company. And the person who was serving me and taking care of me, their customer experience skills were, and by the way, I don't call it customer service, I call it customer experience. Their customer experience skills were just unbelievable. And I knew they were great at their job. But what I did was make sure that I kept communication. I wrote a thank you note to them. I wrote to their manager and said, you know, she's fantastic. She really helped me do this. And she went above and beyond. I love it. I love it. I love it. And then I kept in touch with her. I would just call her every 3 to 6 months, say, hey, I was just touching base. You know, one day I'm going to have you on my team, but I know you're happy now. I just wanted to catch up with you, see how you're doing. Are you still happy? What are you learning? And I did that with many people. The waitress, right? The server, they call it servers now. The server who does an outstanding job. I want to connect with them. I want to stay in touch with them. So now someone leaves and I've got a complete database of possible people that could come in that I could pick up the phone and say, hey, I know you're where you're at, but I'd love to talk to you about an opportunity that I have. And I can tell you that only once in my 40-year career have I left a job and I was looking for a job. Every other time I was recruited away from my company. And I told them no many times. But that one time they called, I said, you know, I'm glad you called. I was thinking about making a move. That's what I'm taught, is keeping these business relationships for the long haul. For that opportunity when maybe it happens. And you never know. They might call you and say, hey, I was let go, or my company this, or I'm not happy there. And you can create a position. Maybe it's a little too soon for somebody you wanted to hire, but you know that it's really good talent. So you bring them on anyway. And you cross train them in all the positions that they might be able to fit into.
How do you manage all of that and run the business at the same time? You know, you're busy. How do you keep track? You must have a system or a CRM or some way of keeping track of that waiter and so forth.
Yeah. Well, again, I know my roles, right? And what I've done with my roles is I've assigned them numbers. That's kind of how I do it. Instead
roles,
of, you
by
know,
me, the people you're going to need. The positions.
Yeah. So my team, right? My team, like I have a relationship manager and an operations director, and I have those, but I also call them, you know, O1 and P2 or whatever. I have like some numbers for them. So I categorize them in my CRM. So when I meet someone who might be a good something, O1, P, whatever, I put them in my database that way so that I recognize. So if someone were to leave, or I need to let someone go, or I need to get another one, if I'm growing and scaling, I can just go into my database and carve those out and make those phone calls, but I'm always making those phone calls anyway. So the CRM helps me with that, but it really starts with the roles that I'm looking for. So as a business owner, we start off with everything is me, right? And
right.
have you heard of don't work in your business, work on your business?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
I actually believe you should not work in or on. So I have a phrase that I use that stop working in and on your business and start living above and beyond your business. So when you're
say that one again. Say that one again. I like that.
Stop working in and on your business and start living above and beyond your business. So if I'm in my business, it's everything me. I'm a solopreneur. I'm the everything, right? All the deal, all the business comes to me.
And this would relate to your career too. So stop working in and on your career, but live above and beyond. So if you're not a solo entrepreneur, but within an organization, it still applies.
Yeah, it still applies because this is all the me. It's your job, right? So you have a job. And so you do everything in your job. And then you get elevated to a manager, right? Or to a team lead. And that's working on. But in order to go above, you have to, this is that big jump of increasing your leadership skills. There's one thing to manage people and there's another thing to lead people. And so when you so the me is everything about me, everything gets done by me and it's the long hours and it's done by me. When we start working on our business, we're tethering ourselves away from, we're tethering ourselves away from the minutia of everything. And we're starting to say, hey, what does my team look like? So this is what I want to do. This is what I need someone to do, a couple of those. And we start developing that role and writing that job description and listing the tasks and duties. We're building the dream team on paper. And so when we're ready to take that leap and we're a manager, now we can say, oh, well, now I need an assistant to help me. Which I don't use those words. I have all these different titles, but I need an assistant to help me. What does that assistant, what are some of the skills that they need, the personalities, the experience that they need? Because I built that team and now I'm out looking for that specific thing rather than anyone. And I'll try to shove them in there and then it won't work. Right.
Yeah, right.
So I'm starting to do that in the on. But what ends up happening in the on is you're managing your methods. So if you're an entrepreneur, you're just spending all your time going, did you do it? Did you do it? I don't know. Did you do it? Did you do it? And because we have to write out not only the roles that we want to fill and the job descriptions, but we also have to write out our process and procedures so that we can let people do things. And when we don't, we're in an enabling capacity and we can never get out of that. And that's why people oscillate back and forth between in, on. I tried to get out and get business, but I had to go back and do everything because they quit. And we oscillate back and forth and we waffle back and forth between that because we don't have our systems written down and we're in an enabling situation where they just need to go to mommy and daddy to get questions answered.
Yeah.
So when you go into leadership, when you start working above, when now everyone on your team is enabled. Empowered. They're all empowered. They speak your language. There's 3 pieces to this. Do they know your vision? Do you have one?
Yeah, right.
They know your vision and do you have one? Do they know the values, the core values that you have for your department, your team, your company? Do they know the values or is it assumptive? Do you know your values? Heck, do you know your personal values and your work values, right? And then the third is, do they know your voice? This is why everywhere in the world, you can go to Starbucks and they will say, what can we get started for you? That's voice.
Yes.
Whereas everywhere in the world, when you go to McDonald's, they say, can I take your order?
Yes, right.
That is voice. So it's like when a client calls, it is just like speaking to you because they know what the expectations are. They know what they want to accomplish and vision. They know what the values are and the non-negotiables and the principles that you have. And they have your voice. Do you speak, are you an emailer? Are you an emoji person? Are you humorous? Are you really strict and stern? Do you pick up the phone or do you text? And so they learn all that from you. And it's just like being with you, and it allows you to have that tethering be further and further away so you can do what you love to do, which is bring the the business in.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're all just running and humming. Then that allows you to go beyond, whether that's sitting on the beach, playing with your grandkids, starting another business. It allows you to go beyond.
I love that. I love that. In the time that we have left, can you say a few things about generational leadership?
Yeah, the thing about generational leadership that I love is that, not only and especially in an environment, as I was just talking about before, understanding personality traits, layered by situational leadership, right? Layered by the leadership cycle. And then we also have to think about all of these people that are come from these different generations. And I would even say that now it's almost like a intergenerational leadership, because it's international and generational leadership. I mean, it's tough to be a leader, right? But yeah, right now in our economy, we have 4 generations that are working in our economy. We will have the last generation starting to enter the workforce here soon, but they aren't yet. So we have, the silent generation. This is the people from the Great Depression in the United States. These are, people that were born in the 20s or the 30s and 40s. Right? We have all these generations, and every one of them, we have boomers and Gen X and millennials, right? All of these generations come with a different set of values, a different work ethic, different accolades that they're looking for. I always think about Gen Xers. They're pretty funny, because when you go into a Gen Xer's office, or I say a young boomer and an older Gen Xer, when you go into their office, they have all of their trophies. Of everything that they won, because that's how they love to be seen, right? Silent generation just says, take care of me, right? Yes. A newer generation is going to say, how are we serving the community? That's the best way to say thank you. So they don't want a plaque. They want to know that you donated money on their behalf, or give them money to donate to a cause. And so how we interact with them, whether we require that they come into the office every day, or whether they are independent workers, whether they're driven, or whether they need, I want to say micromanagement, but some
Structure.
management, some more structured management. So we have to be not only aware of where people are in their commitment to you and their loyalty to you, and where they are with their competency in their job, but we also have to be thinking of all these other peripherals as we approach them and look at them and say, okay, so they're from this generation, and they have this personality, and they have this competence, and they have this commitment. So that's why it's called situational leadership, so that you can approach them as a chameleon and really talk to them, really get what you need from them, create the culture they're looking for, and create the most productivity out of it. And so to manage that, because you said something about the CRM, I have, Excel spreadsheets all the time where I'm looking and saying, where's their development and productivity and customer experience and and accountability and technical skills. And that has an impact on how I approach and work and interact with every single person that I work with. And it becomes second nature. It just becomes second nature.
Yeah. Well, it's like rule number 1 is know your audience, know who you're working for.
Yeah.
Make it about them, put yourself in their shoes so that you can speak to them in a language that they'll understand.
It's that meeting. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, Jen, if someone's listening to this and saying, oh, she's speaking my language, where is one place you could start being a better leader, whether it's generational or getting help or whatever, all the many things that we talked about today? Where's someone could take away right now from this conversation?
Yeah, if I'm understanding your question correctly, definitely talking to me would be great, but you can just go to jenduplessis.com. I have a very quick course that's $197. It's called Letting Go to Grow, and it's all digital. And it's very quick. There's no modules other than me talking to you and giving you an assignment to let go. So that's one place that you can go, and we can provide all the links, etc. Other than that, my recommendation is go to Eventbrite, go to, Facebook groups, And look for conferences on leadership. Learn DISC profile, learn Myers-Briggs, learn the SCORE. Some of those things are really important, but invest in your professional development. We all talk about personal development so much these days, but invest in your professional development as well. There are lots and lots of places out there that are, helping people become leaders. I happen to do it in a very unique way. Mine isn't rah-rah shishkamba. Mine is get to know your people and be the leader that they're looking up to, so that you can go do what you love to do as well, and that you aren't trapped in the babysitting mode that so many people are in.
I love it. And we'll put all those links into the show notes. So Jen Du Plessis, thank you so much for joining us on Speakers Who Get Results. This has been full of great information, which is what I knew you would do. So yay, thank you. This has been Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host. If you enjoyed this conversation, please tell your friends, subscribe to us on whatever app you listen on, subscribe to us on YouTube if you'd rather watch than listen. And especially do us a favor and leave a good review on Apple Podcasts. That's the one that counts. And knowing that we have reviews on Apple Podcasts will get us more visibility. And then we can have more great conversations like the one today with Jen Du Plessis. This has been Speakers Who Get Results. I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.